All right, good morning, everybody. 10th of February. I managed to not watch any of the Super Bowl yesterday, just in case anybody was interested, because I didn't know it was going on. That's how much I like football. But anyway, we're moving on. We're moving on. So today we're going to talk about how to stop overthinking and how to start moving forwards. All right. So a big, awesome subject. And I just wanted to sort of recap what we've been focused on. So the first one of this series was really harnessing focus, getting rid of distractions. We talked about where's the time sucks. Is it social media? Is it, kids? Is it procrastination? Like where are we getting distracted from, and how do we eliminate it? How do we get focused on our goals? That was the first one. Then we talked about momentum, stacking wins. If you get up at the time you said you're going to get up, awesome. If you drank that water when you first got up out of bed, awesome. If you got your exercise in, awesome. You're already 3 wins in, and you may be 20 minutes into your day. So we talked about stacking wins and how consistency creates real results. And then we talked about resilience and adaptability, that you're going to have unforeseen circumstances come along that may derail some people, but not you guys, because we're going to adjust our plans. And then we talked about stepping into the unknown, like real growth. Growth happens outside our, what most people call comfort zone. I call familiar. Most people are not living in comfort, they're living in familiarity. So we are familiar with our income, we're familiar with our lifestyle, we're familiar with our social group, we're familiar with how we do life. And so I believe comfort comes from getting outside of your familiar zone. So that was stepping into the unknown. And then we talked about mental toughness, overcoming setbacks. And now today, and the psychology of success, reframing beliefs and committing to growth. So those are the last 6. And then today we're going to talk about overthinking. And overthinking is really a death blow to most people's dreams. And we think that thinking is going to help us grow because we're taught that we should think before we do stuff. And that's what sabotages a lot. So we've covered a lot of mindset shifts. We've covered a lot of, you know, beliefs. And now it's time to address execution, action. So many people, they get stuck in paralysis by analysis. Anybody relate to that? It's like, oh, what am I going to do? And they get stuck in the fear of failure. And they're also waiting for that perfect time. And I remember when we started a business, we were going through adoption, we were in the court system, and it was not a good time for us. But the timing was good. Does that make sense? It might not have been our perfect time in our own life, but there's times that something comes in that the timing is right. And you have to take action on it, even though you may be at your max, what you believe is your max. I'm a big believer in your sprint today will be your jog of your future. Does that make sense? As fast as you can run right now, you're going to be jogging at that speed as you get fitter and stronger. And it's the same in business. What's my max I'm able to cope with will change because I will get stronger. I was in the gym yesterday and I'm warming up with weights I used to lift with because there's been progression. There was no workout that I felt like, yeah, this was the workout. It's just that consistency. Does that make sense? And it's the same in business. So the fear of failure, procrastination, comes down to asking how. Very few extremely successful people or anybody who's done great things asks a lot of how questions. So what happens is, and see if you relate, you come up with an idea and it's big and it's audacious. And you tell a family member, a friend, what's the first thing? Stick it in chat. What's the first thing? If I said, I'm going to swim between Hawaii, main island, and Maui, or I'm going to, climb Mount Everest. What's the very first thing that most people do. Big things like that. Or I'm going to start my own business. Or I'm going to double my business. What's the very first thing that most people ask when we tell them? And it could be a friend, it could be a family member, somebody that cares about us. What's the first thing that most people ask? How are you going to do it? 1,000%, 1,000%. How questions, if you're asking how you're going to do something, will create fear, will create doubt, will create procrastination, paralysis by analysis. And if you keep asking how, you're going to get to a place and you're going to ask this: am I even good enough? Do I have what it takes? Because we've howled ourselves into fear. Does that make sense? Where I don't ask how. I don't ask how anymore. I ask who. Who do I need to be to go and make that happen? I need to be bolder, or maybe more outgoing, maybe friendlier. So who is a much better question for me than how. But in school, we've been taught how. Does that make sense? In our society, we've been taught how. Do the people that grow the biggest businesses, do the people that make the biggest movements know how to do it? Or do they just start? Do they make mistakes? Yep. Do they fail? Yeah. You know, again, the great, everybody knows Thomas Edison. Yeah. He created the light bulb. He failed 10,000 times. And I learned 10,000 times how not to create a light bulb. What's interesting is the bulb that we used was designed by Tesla. Edison bulb wouldn't work commercially, but Tesla's bulb did. But he was the first to market. Yeah. So he gets the credit. Does that make sense? Do you think there was anybody else trying to create light bulbs? But he was the one that failed 10,000 times. Does that make sense? Do we remember him from his failures? Or do we remember him from his one win? Most people that we remember failed more than the failures. They tried more ways. They did more things because they didn't see it as failure. They just saw it as lessons. Wherever you're at, you might be able to write a great book of how not to build a business now because you tried some things. Yeah. And you've got a great education. Yeah. But if you wrote down what not to do, could you now not do that? But if you take it personally, you're going to get stuck. We often judge ourselves rather than looking at the lesson. And what happens, and I don't know about you, but this is in my life. If I don't get the lesson, I have to repeat the grade again. I have to go through the same thing again and again and again. I'm just going to learn quicker, which means I'm going to fail bigger. So we need to start focus on who do we need to be, because the lie that we believe is we are who we are. Who here is the same person they were 5 years ago? Grown, changed, learned some things, got stung, got hit, figured it out, right? So we're not the same person, but we believe we are. Does that make sense? And we behave the same way as we don't want to ruffle the feathers of other people. So an example, let's say you're an introvert and you decide that you're being an introvert is actually costing you success, costing you freedom, costing you income, costing you happiness. So you decide to behave like an extrovert. What would your friends and family say when you show up for a birthday party or a wedding? Stick that in chat. What would your friends and family say if you were an introvert and you showed up and you're just acting extrovert? What would they say? Who does she think she is? Yeah. What happened at Ruth? You know, it's like, wow, did they get hit on the head? Are they on drugs? They would probably say, I'm not being who I am. Yeah. So people try to enforce their belief of who we are on us, even if it's not helping. Does that make sense? So when we try and grow, The people around us try and keep us at the same level because it makes them feel consistent. Yeah, it gives them certainty. And if we were like over here and then over here, like Andrew's an introvert, but then next week he's an extrovert, and then next week he's an introvert again. People go, I don't know who he is. So they try and make us behave like that. If you have been in business and you try something radically new and you've got friends and family, and they're like, yeah, they've been trying for 5 years. They're going to try to stop you because they don't want you to fail. Does that make sense? I cannot tell you the amount of pushback I get when I do something. So I'm doing my first retreat in the end of April. And I rented the house that Kevin Costner stays at when he's in Southern Utah. So it's a phenomenal house. It is not cheap, but what surprised me, and it shouldn't, but what surprised me is the negativity I got from other people going, Andrew, why don't you just get a hotel room? You know, just a conference room. Why don't you start there? Why don't you do it slowly? Why don't you do it easy? Why don't you do it cheap? And I remember telling him, I'm like, because nobody's ever got to where they want to go by doing this. Does that make sense? I'm going to shift my identity a little bit. I'm going to shift it a bit more. I'm going to shift it a bit more because you'll run out of life by the time you've grown. Does that make sense? I like the Beatles. And the Beatles went away to Germany. And they played over in Germany American hits for a year. And when they came back, people were like, oh, you can't get that much better in 1 year. Like, what did you guys do? Well, what they did is 3-4 shows a day for a year. They did the work. Now, if you've ever listened to the Beatles, their early stuff is very different than the later stuff. Yeah. The early stuff's real simple. Later stuff gets a little bit different. But they sounded just like Buddy Holly and the Everly Brothers. Yeah. They copied what worked and they sounded like them. And with enough repetition, they created their own sound. Does that make sense? And they created their own identity. What most people try and do is they're trying to create everything unique at the beginning. There is a formula for success for fitness and health. Would you agree? And there's a formula for business. Most people, they don't want to do the formula. They go, this is a delicious piece of cake. I love this cake. Can I make this cake? And you go, yes, here is the recipe. Can I leave that out? I'm going to put this in instead. I don't feel like it. I'm not the type of person that could do that. So they leave parts of the ingredients out and then they wonder why the cake looks like a pancake. Does that make sense? They're like, hey, but I did what you set out to do. I said, but did you? Does that make sense? Because they exclude certain parts of the action based on who they think they are. Now, if you're not the same as you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, why do you keep acting like there's a certain part of you that might not be able to grow? So people will accept our growth after about 90 days. 90 days of you showing up in a certain way, and people will accept it. But we also love labels, don't we? Like introverts and extroverts. Because it goes, oh, this is who I am. People love knowing who they are, even if it's holding them back. Does that make sense? When I push into people, they will tell me all the reasons why they can't grow. Yeah, but you don't understand. I'm like, okay, try me. And then I'd remind them that I'm an immigrant that came over with 2 backpacks into the US, highly dyslexic and zero network, like zero network. And I was like, but I had a dream. Does that make sense? I wanted to provide for my family. I remember my father-in-law took me for a walk when I was engaged to Janelle. And he said, how are you going to support my daughter? And I went, sir, I'm going to make $100,000 a year. And he said, how? And I said, I have no clue yet, but I'll find a way. And he said he walked away from that conversation going, my daughter's marrying an idiot. And then I did it. And I remember he asked, so you're going to go to college? I was like, no, I'm not going to go to college. He said, well, you can't make over $100,000 if you don't go to college. And back then, we lived in a place called Fort Collins, Colorado. Denver was where I was going, was about an hour and a half away. I found a supplement company that sold their stuff that was going to expire in about 5-6 weeks. And I would drive down there in my little Hyundai Elantra with the door broke, so I had to wind down the window to open it. I had to park it on a hill because the alternator was bad. Paint all peeled off. And I would fill that little car full to the brim of supplements. And then I'd drive back to Fort Collins and I would sell them. And that's what I did when I first came to the US. I also mowed grass and I lifted rocks. I did whatever I could do to start. And I remember feeling that was a million miles away, but it was something. And when faced with the decision of doing nothing and doing something, we should do something. Does that make sense? And so that's how I started, because I didn't have the luxury of overthinking because I was broke. And just needed to find a way. And so overthinking just kills all momentum. And what I found is if I'm really, really busy, I don't have time to overthink. I just do. So this house that I've rented, people are like, well, what if it doesn't work? I said, then me and Janelle will have a very expensive, phenomenal 3 days. All right. And they were like, well, what if some people come? I was like, then we'll get some great video for social media. Well, what if you lose money? I said, then it'll be a tax deduction. We have to have beliefs that it's a win-win scenario no matter what. Yeah. I'm either going to win, knocking my microphone. I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn. Does that make sense? That's the only option I'm going to live in. I'm going to win or I'm going to learn, but I'm not losing. It may take me longer, but I'm not going to lose. It may be harder than I thought, but I'm not going to lose. So imperfect action is better than no action. Like I got this and I put a sticky note on Janelle's computer and it says, done is better than beautiful. Get messy. Go start. What I found is if I get into action, I'll figure out along the way. So many people, especially in the personal development world, they talk about being in alignment first. Get your mindset, get everything in the right place first, and then take action. And I just don't see that as a reality. The people that get the results take action regardless of how they feel. Because they have a strong why. Yeah. Think of somebody that's really done something great in your business. Somebody that spoke, you know their backstory. Did they have a strong why? And sometimes that why is full of pain. Sometimes it's full of pleasure. Sometimes it's both. I need to know the pain of not achieving it, and I need to know the pleasure of achieving it. I need to know the difference it's going to make to my life and the difference it's going to make to my kids' lives or my grandkids' lives or people's lives. Because when it's bigger than me, I'll stay in action much longer. Anybody else like that? The more we can attach other people. So biographies are great. I'd encourage you to watch biographies, documentaries, books, and you'll start seeing these imperfect people doing great things, and they're doing it scared. So I'm not asking how, I'm asking who. Who do I need to be? Even if it doesn't feel like it's me. Does that make sense? And I know that might sound weird, even though like I met with a guy who posted on social media at the end of last year, and he's like, hey, new to town, business owner, I have 3 Great Danes and I like Jeeps. And I went, awesome. So I messaged him and we went out for coffee. And then I hear the story. I hear the story of who he is and the story of the struggles that he's got going on right now with a family member. And I went, wow, this guy's awesome. But you know what I didn't want to do? Reach out to somebody on social media to go and get coffee. That makes sense. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? because it creates growth. Again, when faced with the decision of doing nothing and doing something, always do something. So what's the something that you could do? Do you know your dream? Do you know what you want to achieve this month? If you weren't attached to your identity so well, what would you do? Maybe feels like maybe out of character for you, but you know it would equal growth. Because I know this, when we start doing bold things, we start doing more bold things. When we play timid, we start being more timid. Yeah. It's the same as if I start eating Snickers. You know what I want? More Snickers. But if I'm eating more salad, you know what I want? More salad. Human beings crave what they do. If people drink soda, they want more soda. If you drink more water, you want more water. Has anybody noticed that? If we start getting some wins, guess what? We want more wins. If we start making excuses, guess what? We want more excuses. So it's time to drop the stories. So here's a quote to write down. Time. I'm going to start there. Time is to fear as oxygen is to fire. All right. Time is to fear as oxygen is to fire. The more we wait, the more fear we feel. And I've learned this mountain biking. If I get to the top of the mountain, I spend an hour riding up there and I get to the top. Oh, what happens if you crash? What if you break your arm up here? What if you break your leg? How will you get down? And it starts going through my mind. And the longer I stay there, the more scared I get. What I've learned is when I ride to the top, just keep riding. Do not give the time because your fear will increase. If you're thinking, I should call this person, I should call this person, I should call them. Oh, well, what happens if it's the wrong time? What if they're putting the kids to bed? What if they're just sitting down for dinner? What if they just got back from work? What if they're in a meeting? What if they're having lunch? And what you'll find is you'll talk yourself out of it because there'll be no time. Where my belief now is this is the perfect time to call. And if not, my voice message is going to be the highlight of their day. That makes sense. Win-win, win-win again. You know, I have not always thought that way. So get rid of time. Think about the 3-second rule. Yeah. Did you all grow up with a 3-second rule? Drop it on the floor and you're like, 3-second rule. Oh, stick it in your mouth. Don't overthink it. Get great at deciding and then taking action immediately. The more you can get clear on taking action, you're like, you know what? I should do a social media post. You know what? I should call somebody. Grab your phone and you call them right away. But, you know, don't I need to sit down and think about what I'm going to say? Nope. Just call them. That's how people do it. I saw this video of a guy. He's going out into college campuses and he's talking to this kid and he's like, hey, so what do you want to be? He's like, I want to be an engineer. He said, do you know which company? He's like, oh, I'd love to work for this company. And he's like, well, have you called them? He's like, well, no, I'm not. I haven't graduated yet. So the guy grabs his phone and he does a Google search of this company, gets the number and presses call. And he's like, hey, I'm here at this college and I've got a young engineer here. And he told me that you would love to work for your company. Who could he talk to right now that just gives him an idea, the best way to go about that? And they said, oh, we've got so-and-so here. He would love to speak to him. He passes the phone over to the kid. And the kid's on the phone right away. It didn't take a skill set, a unique skill set. It just took not thinking. Does that make sense? And then this kid's talking to his ideal place he wants to work at within 15 seconds of telling a stranger. Why? Because the stranger did not have a story about why he couldn't. What's your story about what's stopping you? I promise you it's false. So here's a way of thinking about it. Two possible scenarios to how to make decisions faster. Is it reversible or is it an irreversible decision? There's not many decisions that I can think of that are irreversible. If I buy a house and I don't like it, can I sell the house? Yep. If I paint my house a weird color, can I repaint it? If I buy the wrong car, can I get a different one? If I make a phone call, can I make another one? Yeah, it's not irreversible, is it? You know, if I don't get the answer that I want, I can make another call. The only one I can think of that's irreversible is to have kids. That's it. Everything else is reversible. Yeah. So I want you to just think about nothing's really that permanent. So 90% of decisions are reversible. That makes sense. Stop acting like the permanent decisions. And then use the 80% rule. If you're 80% sure that it's going to work, go do it. Yeah, if I'm like, yeah, you know, if I called this person, it could work. Great, I'm going to call them. But I'm not going to play the game of why it's not going to work. How many people do you know more about what if it fails than what if it works? Are you going to start a business? Well, what if it fails? What if you waste your time? What if? Well, what if it works? What would my life be like if it works? Well, I'm going to have to get scared. The lie is that successful people, it was easy. What if I told you they were more scared than you? But they did it anyway. What if it wasn't about knowledge or skill? What if it wasn't about feeling good? What if it was just about doing? So if you're 80% sure, go for it. 90% of your decisions are reversible. And the best time to start any of this was yesterday. Second best time is today. So own that. So what have you been overthinking on? Where's your overthinking coming up? Is it like, so many people, it's like, oh, what gym should I join? Closest one. Why? Because you'll go more often. That's it. Yeah, well, what exercises should I do? Any. Doesn't matter. Just go move. Yeah, but I've got a bad knee. Awesome. 90% of your body works great. Yeah. Don't do stuff with your knee. Does that make sense? There's always an excuse. I remember when I broke my leg and dislocated my ankle, and my mum calls, and it's like 2 days later, and she's like, "You sound like you're somewhere busy." I said, "Oh, I'm in the gym, ma'am." She goes, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm on a recumbent bike." She goes, "But you shouldn't be. You should be in bed." And I was like, "Ma'am, as hard as I could pedal, you know those machines that you have to pedal to turn on. I couldn't even turn the thing on. But I figured moving my leg around is better than not moving my leg around. And then I could lift weights. And I hopped around the gym, and I did, because that was my belief. 90% of my body's just fine. It's just one part of my body. So everybody in this call can speak English, which is the most used language in the world. Everybody here can write. Everybody here can do math. Everybody here can talk. Everybody here knows people. That's all you need. Does that make sense? But the people, this is what I found. Sometimes it's the people that are the smartest that struggle the most because they talk themselves out of it. Sometimes, have you ever met somebody who's really wealthy, who's an idiot? If I had more hands, I would raise more hands. And I'm like, how did they do it? They don't think. Does that make sense? If it was a matter of intelligence, all engineers would be they have the most income of any people. Does that make sense? Yeah, we're all enough. Yeah, we've got everything we need. Yeah. We are our own biggest critics. We know all our flaws. We judge ourselves the hardest. And we put other people on a pedestal that it must be easy for them. It's not. They see all their flaws as well. But we just don't. It's time to start seeing our superpowers and not our kryptonite. Does that make sense? Start doing it. regardless of how you feel. Yeah, sometimes on the job training is the best teacher. Yeah, so let's go mess up this week. Let's go screw up. Let's learn. Let's try something new. Let's go, hey, I tried this and it did not work. Awesome. One step closer to finding out what works. So I hope that helps. I will post this on my YouTube channel. So if you like this and want to listen to it again, or if you've got anybody else that needs to listen to this, send them over there. Yeah, so don't now. No, just to talk yourself into stuff. Yeah. Awesome. Great. Use your intelligence and your creativity to create stories of why it is going to work rather than stories about why it will not. That makes sense. So thanks for being on today. I'm going to speak to you all next week. Have a great one and go screw up. Go get dirty. Go mess up and have fun. All right. Catch you later. Bye.